The sun burned bright over the wide plains, turning the earth into a dry, golden sea that stretched farther than the eye could see. A young cowboy rode slowly along a dusty trail, his hat pulled low to shield his eyes from the glaring sun. He was a quiet man, not very tall or strong, and often felt invisible among the other cowboys who loved to boast of their courage and skill. He was not like them. He liked simple work, caring for his cattle, and watching the world around him with curiosity. Today, curiosity had led him far from his small ranch, into lands that were less familiar, lands that belonged to others. As he moved through a narrow canyon, the sound of hooves stopped him. Ahead, standing tall beside a horse, was a woman unlike anyone he had ever seen. She was large, strong, and carried herself with a confidence that filled the space around her. Her hair was dark and long, flowing over her shoulders, and her eyes held a calm, knowing light. She was from the Apache tribe, a people whose lives were connected to the land in ways the cowboy could barely understand. The cowboy slowed his horse and felt a nervous flutter in his chest. He had heard stories of the Apache people, and he knew that approaching them without permission could be dangerous. But there was something in her presence that made him feel he could not turn away. Something in her calm smile, the way she looked at the horizon, made him feel a strange pull. He swallowed hard and dismounted, his boots crunching against the dry earth. What will happen if I touch you?" he asked, his voice barely louder than a whisper. The question came out awkward, almost foolish, even to his own ears. But he could not think of another way to express the curiosity that burned inside him. The woman paused and looked at him fully for the first time. Her eyes were deep and steady, like the roots of an ancient tree. For a moment, the cowboy feared she would shout, or worse, turn away in anger. But instead, she smiled. It was not a mocking smile. It was gentle, knowing, and strangely reassuring. The cowboy blinked. He had expected anger, suspicion, or silence. He had not expected a smile. His heart slowed a little, and he felt the tension in his body ease. Encouraged by her calm, he spoke again, this time more carefully. "I mean no harm. I've never met someone like you before. I don't understand, and I want to learn." The woman tilted her head slightly. She studied him, but there was no threat in her gaze. Slowly, she nodded. The gesture seemed small, but to the cowboy, it carried a weight that words could not express. She understood that he meant well, that his question came from curiosity, not from disrespect. He stepped a little closer, keeping his hands where she could see them. I don't know much about your ways, but I want to understand. I want to be allowed to see the world the way you do, even for a little while." For a long moment, she said nothing. Then, with a soft laugh that sounded like the wind through the trees, she spoke. Her words were few, but kind. "You must first see with your eyes and heart, not with your hands. Touch comes later, if it comes at all." The cowboy nodded, feeling a mixture of relief and awe. He had come expecting danger, and instead, he found patience, wisdom, and a quiet strength that made him feel small in the best possible way. He knew that this moment, this meeting, was unusual. It was rare for someone like him, from the settler lands, to meet someone like her, from the Apache lands, and share a moment of understanding. The day passed slowly as the two of them moved together through the canyon. The cowboy watched her care for her horse, noticing the gentle touch she used, the soft words she spoke. She seemed to move with the land itself, as if she were part of it, and he felt an unfamiliar respect growing inside him. He realized that this was not just about meeting someone different. It was about seeing a way of life that he had never known. By late afternoon, the sun began to lower toward the horizon, painting the sky in colors of orange and red. They reached a small clearing, where the woman set up a simple camp. The cowboy offered to help, and she accepted with a nod, showing him how to arrange the firewood, how to set the small cooking pot over the flames. His movements were awkward at first, but she guided him patiently, correcting his mistakes with a quiet smile rather than scolding him. As night fell, the stars appeared one by one, sparkling over the vast plains. The cowboy sat beside the fire, warmed by the flames and the strange comfort of her presence. He felt nervous about asking more questions, worried that he might offend her. But the curiosity inside him could not be silenced. How do you live like this?" he asked softly. "So free and strong and everything I can't seem to be?" The woman looked at him, her eyes reflecting the firelight. "Freedom is not what you think," she said. "It is not only being unbound. It is knowing yourself, knowing the land, and knowing others. Strength is not just in the arm or the hand. It is in the mind, in patience, and in respect." He listened, hanging on her every word. In his world, strength was measured by skill with a lasso or a gun, by how loudly you could shout or how fast you could ride. But she showed him another kind of strength, one that came from calm, from understanding, and from being true to yourself. For a long time, they sat together in silence, watching the fire dance and the shadows play across the rocks. The cowboy felt something he had never felt before, a sense of peace, even in the wild, unpredictable world he had always thought was dangerous. He realized that the giant woman's smile, the one that had greeted him when he asked his awkward question, was not just a smile. It was a lesson. It was a bridge between two worlds, a small spark of connection that could grow into understanding. He wondered how long they would sit there, two people from different worlds, connected by a moment that could have been fleeting, but felt eternal. He thought of his home, of the cattle and the ranch, and yet he did not feel the need to return just yet. For the first time, he felt that the world was bigger than he had imagined, and he wanted to see more of it, to learn more, before returning to the small life he had always known. As the fire burned low, he realized that he had come seeking a simple answer, a simple understanding of what would happen if he touched her. And now he understood that some questions do not need immediate answers. Some questions teach patience, respect, and observation. They teach that connection can exist without force, and that courage is not always loud or obvious. By the time he finally lay down to rest, the cowboy felt a quiet determination growing inside him. He did not know what tomorrow would bring, or what dangers might lie ahead in the unknown lands. But he knew one thing. He would remember the giant Apache woman's smile, her calm, and her strength. And he knew that the lesson he had learned today would stay with him, guiding his steps and shaping the man he would become. The night was deep and silent, save for the sounds of the wind and the occasional rustle of a small animal. The cowboy closed his eyes, feeling the earth beneath him, the sky above, and the strange warmth of human connection that had appeared in the middle of a vast, lonely plain. He felt safe in a way he had never felt before, not because the world had changed, but because he had begun to see it differently. In the morning, the cowboy would wake to new challenges, new paths, and new lessons. But tonight, he rested in the quiet knowledge that meeting someone who seemed so different could open a door to understanding, respect, and courage. And he knew that he had only just begun this journey, one step at a time, with the lessons of patience and connection guiding him forward. And so, under the wide sky, the cowboy and the giant Apache woman rested, two souls from different worlds meeting at the edge of understanding, each learning from the other, each changed in ways they would carry forever. The morning sun rose slowly, painting the plains in soft gold and pink. The cowboy woke to the sound of birds singing and the gentle rustle of the wind through the tall grass. The giant Apache woman was already awake, tending to her horse with careful, practiced hands. She moved with a quiet grace, calm and steady, as if every motion was part of a long, unbroken rhythm. The cowboy rubbed his eyes and took a deep breath, feeling the cool morning air fill his lungs. He remembered the night before, the smile, the calm words, and the lessons he had begun to understand. Today, he thought, he would try to see more, to learn more, and to step a little further into a world that had once felt strange and intimidating. "Good morning," he said softly, careful not to startle her. The woman looked up, her eyes meeting his. She nodded in acknowledgement, a small smile playing on her lips. It was a smile that said, without words, that she trusted him to be present, to watch, and to learn. For the next few hours, they worked together. The cowboy helped feed the horses and gather water from a nearby stream. At first, his movements were clumsy, and he stumbled more than once. She would watch him quietly and then show him the correct way, guiding his hands without rushing or scolding. Slowly, he began to understand not just the actions, but the purpose behind them, the care, the respect, and the connection to the land and the animals. As they worked, the cowboy asked questions. Careful ones. Respectful ones. "How do you know the land so well?" he asked. The woman paused, thinking. "I listen," she said finally. "I watch. I feel. The land speaks if you are willing to pay attention. Every plant, every animal, every stone has a story. And if you listen, it will teach you." The cowboy nodded, absorbing her words. He had never considered that the land itself could be a teacher, that nature could hold knowledge that no book or man could fully explain. He felt a sense of wonder, realizing that he had been walking through the world half-blind, unaware of the lessons around him. By midday, the sun was high, and the heat pressed down on them. They rested in the shade of a large tree, sitting on the cool grass. The cowboy watched her as she ate a simple meal, noticing how she savored each bite, how calm and deliberate her movements were. He thought about his own life back at the ranch, the rush, the worry, the constant need to prove himself, and he felt a strange longing for the simplicity and balance he saw in her world. "You live differently than I do," he said finally. "You are calm. You are strong. You understand things I can barely see." She looked at him, her eyes steady and clear. "Strength is not in rushing, nor in proving. It is in patience, in learning, and in respecting what is around you. You will find strength if you are willing to open your mind and heart, not just your hands." The cowboy thought about this as he watched the wind ripple through the grass. He realized that he had already begun to feel stronger, not in muscle, but in understanding. The fear he had carried in approaching her had softened. He felt courage growing, quietly, inside him, like a small fire waiting to grow. As the day wore on, they traveled together along a narrow trail that led to a small creek. The water sparkled in the sun, clear and cold. The woman showed him how to find safe drinking spots, how to observe the plants and animals for signs of the land's moods and rhythms. The cowboy listened and watched, learning not just with his eyes, but with his heart. At one point, a deer appeared at the edge of the trees. The cowboy froze, unsure what to do. The woman whispered, "Watch, quietly. Do not move. Respect its space." He held his breath, and the deer looked at them for a moment, before bounding away. The cowboy felt a thrill, not from conquering, but from witnessing. It was a lesson in patience and respect, and he felt himself changing in ways he could not yet fully understand. By late afternoon, they returned to the clearing. The cowboy felt tired, but his mind was alive with new thoughts. He had begun to see that the world was not only about survival, but about connection to people, to animals, and to the land itself. He sat beside the fire while the woman prepared a small meal. He remembered the question that had started it all. What will happen if I touch you? At first, it had been a question of curiosity and fear, but now he understood that it was also a question of trust and respect. He reached out slowly, his hand hovering near hers. She looked at him, her eyes calm, and gave a small nod. He touched her hand lightly, a gesture of friendship and respect, not of demand or desire. She did not pull away. Instead, she squeezed his hand gently, a silent acknowledgement of trust and understanding. The cowboy felt a warmth spread through him. It was not the heat of the sun or the fire, but a warmth born of connection, of knowing that he had crossed a boundary with care and respect. For a moment, the world seemed to pause. The wind stopped, and even the stars that would soon appear held their breath. The night came again, and the stars filled the sky like a million tiny lanterns. The cowboy and the woman sat together, sharing the quiet of the plains. He spoke little, listening more than he had ever listened in his life. And she spoke of the land, of her people, and of the lessons she had learned from years of living with patience and respect. He realized that his life at the ranch, the life he had thought was all there was only a small part of the world. There were lessons in every stone, in every tree, and in every person he met. He thought of the cattle he cared for, of the other cowboys, and of the small challenges he faced daily. And he understood that courage and understanding were not always loud or obvious. Sometimes they were quiet, gentle, and steady, like the hands of the woman beside him. Days passed. The cowboy stayed longer than he had planned. Each day brought new lessons. He learned to ride the land with care, to observe the animals without disturbing them, and to understand that strength came from knowledge and patience, not just from skill with a rope or a gun. The woman taught him to respect the rhythms of life, to listen before acting, and to see the world through the eyes of someone who truly understood it. The cowboy's heart grew lighter, his mind sharper, and his spirit stronger. He began to see that trust could be earned slowly, that understanding could bridge worlds that seemed far apart. He learned that friendship did not depend on similarity, but on respect and patience. When it was finally time for him to return to his ranch, he felt a mixture of sadness and gratitude. He had come to learn, and he had learned more than he could have imagined. He had discovered courage, patience, respect, and the quiet strength that comes from seeing the world clearly. He turned to the woman one last time. "Thank you," he said, "for teaching me, for trusting me, for showing me a world I could never have imagined." She smiled, the same calm and knowing smile he had seen when he first asked his awkward question. "Remember," she said, "strength is not always loud, courage is not always obvious, and understanding comes when you listen with your heart." The cowboy mounted his horse and rode back toward his ranch, the sun setting behind him, painting the sky in shades of red and gold. He looked back once at the woman standing tall and proud, and he knew that the lessons he had learned from her would stay with him for the rest of his life. As he rode through the plains, he felt different. He felt stronger, calmer, and more aware of the world around him. He thought of the smile, the quiet guidance, and the trust that had been shared. And he realized that sometimes, meeting someone different, someone from another world, could change you forever, not in grand gestures or loud moments, but in small, quiet ways that shape the heart and mind. By the time he reached his ranch, the cowboy was a different man. He approached his work with new patience, treated the animals with more care, and listened more closely to those around him. He remembered the lessons of respect, trust, and understanding, and carried them into every part of his life. Years later, when he looked back on that summer in the plains, he would always remember the giant Apache woman's smile. It was a symbol of courage, connection, and the quiet power of understanding. It reminded him that even a simple question, asked with honesty and respect, could open a door to a world larger and richer than he had ever imagined. And so, the cowboy's life continued, changed forever by the meeting of two people from different worlds, bound together for a short time by trust, respect, and the shared lesson that true strength comes from the heart.